The stagecoach rattled into town as if reluctant to finish the journey, wheels clattering over loose boards laid across the mud of Main Street. The driver pulled back on the reins, and the horses snorted clouds into the dusk air, their sweat steaming in the cooling light. When the door creaked open, Clara May Whitfield stepped down, clutching a small carpetbag with both hands, as though the stitched leather contained not just her belongings but the last fragile pieces of herself. She lingered at the edge of the wooden platform, her shawl too thin for the prairie wind that had already stolen the day's warmth. The sky stretched vast and streaked with red, as if someone had dragged a blade across the heavens. People stopped to look. They always did when a stranger arrived, but this was more than curiosity. It was appraisal, suspicion, the quiet flicker of judgment that made her tighten her grip on the bag and keep her eyes lowered. The town of Ash Creek was no bigger than 2 streets crossed like a crucifix. A saloon with light spilling through its swinging doors stood opposite a clapboard church whose windows glowed faintly with the last of sunset. Between them stretched the small, brittle lives of shopkeepers, drifters, and settlers, each with eyes sharp enough to peel the skin off anyone foolish enough to stand too long in the open. Clara May felt their stares slice through her already worn resolve. She forced her steps toward the inn, the only place in town where a woman traveling alone might find a roof. Its sign creaked overhead, carved letters so weathered you had to squint to make out the painted star. Smoke curled from its chimney, and the faint smell of frying onions promised warmth inside. She pushed the door open and stepped into a world of heat and noise. Men gathered around wooden tables scarred with knife marks and spilled whiskey. Cards slapped. Boots thudded. The piano in the corner was missing 2 keys, but the player banged out a tune loud enough to make up for it. All sound dimmed when they saw her. Conversations trailed off, and Clara felt her cheeks burn beneath the weight of sudden silence. Behind the counter stood Etta Doyle, the innkeeper, a woman built broad in the shoulders and sharp in the eyes. She dried her hands on her apron and gave Clara a smile that wasn't quite one. "Well now," Etta drawled, voice rich with curiosity disguised as hospitality. "What wind blew you in, sweetheart?" Clara shifted her bag. "Just looking for a room." A few men chuckled into their drinks. Etta leaned across the counter, eyes gliding over Clara from her worn shoes to the threadbare shawl. "Room, eh? What kind of room you think we keep for ladies traveling alone?" The inn's air grew heavier. Clara knew what they were thinking. She had seen those looks in every place she had stopped, measuring her, deciding whether she was a runaway wife, a wayward daughter, or something cheaper still. "I have money," Clara whispered, laying coins on the counter. They looked pitiful even to her own eyes. Etta tapped a finger against the wood. "That'll buy you supper, maybe. But rooms? All taken." Laughter rippled through the saloon. Clara's throat tightened, shame rising like bile. She reached for her coins, thinking perhaps she could eat at least, then walk the night until morning light gave her courage to move again. The saloon doors groaned open behind her. Heavy boots crossed the floor, each step unhurried, certain, like a man who feared neither stairs nor silence. Clara turned slightly and saw him, broad-shouldered, hat brim shadowing his face, dust clinging to his coat. He moved with the gravity of someone who had spent his life listening more than speaking. Silas Boone. Though Clara did not yet know his name, the room seemed to. Eyes followed him, wary and respectful, as he reached the counter and set down a silver coin. "She'll take my room," he said, voice low but carrying. The word struck like a hammer. For a moment, even the piano faltered. Clara's breath caught. Her eyes lifted, meeting his for the briefest second. They were storm-colored eyes, deep and unreadable, yet something inside them held steadiness, not cruelty. Etta Doyle's eyebrows shot up. "Your room, Silas. Since when do you give up your bed?" He didn't look at her. His gaze stayed on Clara. "Since now." Clara's lips parted, but no words came. The room waited, hungry for scandal. She found herself whispering, though she wished she could swallow it back, "I've never shared a bed." The hush that followed was thick as smoke. Silas Boone tipped his hat, voice quiet but steady as iron. "Then share mine forever." Laughter didn't come this time. Not mocking, not cruel. Only silence, sharp and charged. It was as though every soul present understood something had shifted, though none could name what. Etta recovered first, snorting as she swept the coins into her hand. "Well, isn't that a sermon?" She slid a key across the counter. "Upstairs. Second door." Silas picked up Clara's bag as if it weighed nothing. He didn't touch her, didn't wait for permission. He simply started for the stairs, and after a stunned breath, Clara followed. The weight of the town's eyes pressed between her shoulder blades all the way to the landing. The hallway smelled of dust and old wood. Silas unlocked the door and pushed it open to a small room with a narrow bed, a basin, and a single window that caught the dying light. He set her bag on the bed, then without a word, crossed to the closet, pulled out a blanket, and spread it on the floor near the window. Clara stood frozen, fingers twisted in the edge of her shawl. "You mean to sleep there?" Silas glanced up from smoothing the blanket. "Bed's yours." "I don't understand." "Don't need to." He sat on the floor, leaning his back against the wall as though that was all the explanation required. She stared at him, her chest rising too fast, her pulse loud in her ears. Every man she had met since leaving home had wanted something, money, obedience, or the soft currency of her body. And yet this one, with his hands calloused from labor and his silence carved from stone, offered nothing but space. It unsettled her more than cruelty would have. She sank onto the bed, clutching her bag like armor. Her throat ached with unshed words, questions, fears. But exhaustion weighted her limbs. For the first time in days, she loosened her grip and let the bag slip to the floor. The room settled into silence. Outside, horses stamped in the street. A dog barked once, then faded. Clara lay down, her cheek pressed against the rough pillow. Across the room, Silas stretched out, his boots still on, his hat tilted low over his eyes. Sleep did not come quickly. Clara's thoughts churned, tangled with shame, with wonder, with suspicion. Yet through the churn, she heard something steady, the slow, unbroken rhythm of Silas Boone's breathing. She listened until the sound pulled her toward rest, as if that quiet steadiness could anchor her against all she feared. And as her eyes closed, she realized with a pang both frightening and strange, she trusted him more than she trusted herself. Morning came pale and cold, the kind of light that revealed too much. Clara woke before she wished to, roused by the clatter of pans and the faint murmur of voices drifting from below. For a moment she did not remember where she was, only that the bed beneath her was softer than earth, and the sound of steady breathing no longer filled the room. She sat up quickly. Silas Boone was gone. Her bag still lay at the foot of the bed, untouched. A blanket, carefully folded, rested on the chair where he had slept. The absence of his presence pressed on her like a weight, heavier than his silence had been. She drew her shawl tighter and forced herself downstairs. The Painted Stars dining room was already crowded. Men hunched over eggs and biscuits, boots caked with dust, hats tipped low. Conversations that should have flowed easily faltered when Clara appeared at the bottom of the stairs. Their eyes dragged over her like rough hands. She felt each look as if it left a bruise. Etta Doyle caught her eye from behind the counter, a smirk tugging her lips. "Sleep well, sweetheart," she called, loud enough for every table to hear. Heat flared in Clara's cheeks. She wanted to vanish into the floorboards, but her legs carried her toward an empty table near the corner. Before she could sit, Silas appeared from the back, carrying 2 plates. He set one in front of her without ceremony and sat across from her. The murmurs thickened. Etta leaned close to a customer and whispered behind her hand, but her eyes never left Clara. Clara picked at her food, appetite smothered by shame. She could not bring herself to meet Silas's gaze. He ate slowly, methodically, as if unaware of the room's judgment. Yet when he spoke, his voice carried through the din. "Let folks talk," he said. "Bed's just wood and blankets. A home's what you build inside it." Silence rolled out like a wave. Forks froze halfway to mouths. Clara finally looked up, startled by the calm conviction in his words. "She'll take my room," he said, voice low but carrying. The word struck like a hammer. For a moment, even the piano faltered. Clara's breath caught. Her eyes lifted, meeting his for the briefest second. They were storm-colored eyes, deep and unreadable, yet something inside them held steadiness, not cruelty. Etta Doyle's eyebrows shot up. "Your room, Silas. Since when do you give up your bed?" He didn't look at her. His gaze stayed on Clara. "Since now." Clara's lips parted, but no words came. The room waited, hungry for scandal. She found herself whispering, though she wished she could swallow it back, "I've never shared a bed." The hush that followed was thick as smoke. Silas Boone tipped his hat, voice quiet but steady as iron. "Then share mine forever." Laughter didn't come this time. Not mocking, not cruel. Only silence, sharp and charged. It was as though every soul present understood something had shifted, though none could name what. Etta recovered first, snorting as she swept the coins into her hand. "Well, isn't that a sermon?" She slid a key across the counter. "Upstairs. Second door." Silas picked up Clara's bag as if it weighed nothing. He didn't touch her, didn't wait for permission. He simply started for the stairs, and after a stunned breath, Clara followed. The weight of the town's eyes pressed between her shoulder blades all the way to the landing. The hallway smelled of dust and old wood. Silas unlocked the door and pushed it open to a small room with a narrow bed, a basin, and a single window that caught the dying light. He set her bag on the bed, then without a word, crossed to the closet, pulled out a blanket, and spread it on the floor near the window. Clara stood frozen, fingers twisted in the edge of her shawl. "You mean to sleep there?" Silas glanced up from smoothing the blanket. "Bed's yours." Her throat closed. She knelt, taking the apple with trembling hands. "Thank you," she whispered. The boy smiled wide, then darted after his father. That small grace lodged deeper in her heart than the marshal's cruelty. That night, shadows stretched long across town. Clara sat near the inn's window, sewing a loose hem in her shawl. Silas was silent, sharpening a knife with slow, steady strokes. The quiet was companionable until it shattered with a drunken shout. The door downstairs slammed. Heavy boots pounded the stairs. A ranch hand reeking of whiskey staggered into the hall, his face flushed, eyes mean. He stopped at their door and pounded with his fist. "Boone! You keeping a whore up here?" he bellowed. "Thought you was better than that." Clara's blood froze. Her needle fell from her fingers. Shame surged hot and choking. Silas rose without haste. He set the knife down, crossed to the door, and opened it. The ranch hand swayed, sneering. "She spread her legs for you yet?" Silas stepped into the hall, pulling the door shut behind him. He didn't speak. He didn't draw the gun at his hip. He only stood, tall and steady, eyes fixed on the man with a calmness more dangerous than rage. The drunk's bravado faltered. His smirk twitched. Silence pressed in, thick as stone. Finally, with a muttered curse, he stumbled backward and fled down the stairs, boots clattering into the night. Silas returned and closed the door gently. Clara still sat frozen, her shawl clutched to her chest. He said nothing, only resumed his place by the window. The steadiness of his presence filled the room more than any words could. Clara's eyes blurred with tears. "All my life," she whispered, "I've been told I was a burden. Unwanted. And yet you," her voice broke. "You gave me your room. Your name before the town could tear me apart. Silas turned. For the first time, his gaze met hers without shadow. He knelt before her, not touching, only holding her eyes with quiet intensity. "A man knows," he said softly, "when he's found the part of himself he didn't know was missing." The tears spilled freely then. Clara reached out, her hand trembling, and placed it in his. His fingers closed gently around hers, not as possession, but as recognition. The room was hushed but alive, the air thick with something stronger than fear, richer than shame. It was not thunder, not fire. It was the slow unfurling of trust, the quiet knowledge that two battered souls had found a place to rest. Outside, the town would gossip. Etta would sneer. The marshal would frown. But in that room, by the glow of a single lamp, Clara and Silas carved out a space untouched by judgment. She leaned forward, pressing her forehead to his, breath mingling. For the first time, she let herself believe she was more than baggage. And though the future loomed uncertain as the wide, merciless plains, the moment held steady. Open-ended, fragile, but real,